Okay, let's dive into a story that shows just how a single death can spark a national crisis, how it can fracture a country and completely challenge the story its leaders are trying to tell.
So we're going to walk through the fallout from the killing of Alex Pretti. He was a VA ICU nurse, and he was killed by federal agents. It's a story about two conflicting narratives, an incredible show of community solidarity, and a political coalition that was really pushed right to its breaking point.
All right, let's start at the very beginning with the event that lit the fuse. And the reactions to it, well, they couldn't have been more different. And that contrast really set the stage for everything that came next. So picture this. The night after Alex Pretti was killed by federal officials in Minneapolis, the nation is starting to mourn. But at the White House, they're hosting a black-tie private screening for a documentary about the First Lady. This contrast was just so stark, and it immediately got people's attention. You'd think the next morning the focus would be on the national grief, right? Or the incident itself. Nope. The first official communication was this really long social media post about a construction dispute. It was a complaint about a lawsuit over a new ballroom being built at the White House. That right there really set the tone for where the administration's priorities were. So, how did the administration try to justify the killing? Let's get into the official narrative they started to build, a story that was, challenged right from the get-go. Okay, so this was their first big move. They decided to completely reframe the entire event. The U.S. Border Patrol commander, Greg Buvino, actually went on TV and said that the federal agents, not the civilian who was killed, were the true victims. I mean, what a bold and provocative way to start your defense. Now, the whole federal argument really boiled down to one thing: Pretti's weapon. The FBI director claimed that just because Prettis was armed, it proved he was up to no good. But the context on the ground, it told a totally different story. Prettis was actually part of a community first responder network. He had a legal permit for his weapon, and he never even brandished it. That disconnect became a huge point of conflict. But back in Minneapolis, the reaction from the community was powerful. It was a direct and united front against that federal narrative. I mean, what happened in Minneapolis was this incredible surge of community action. People didn't just protest, they organized. You had citizens patrolling their own streets, people donating food and setting up legal services. And then, in this amazing display, the Minnesota National Guard, wearing bright neon vests to show they weren't federal agents, were seen handing out coffee and donuts to the protesters. You could even hear the strain in the voice of local law enforcement. The Minneapolis police chief, Brian O'Hara, came out and said that his department had 0 shootings the entire year before. And now, they were dealing with the 3rd shooting by federal agents in just 3 weeks. He said, flat out, this is not sustainable. It really shows the chaos it was causing his city. And the pushback just kept escalating, all the way up to the state level. In a move you almost never see, Minnesota's own Department of Corrections launched a website, and its stated purpose? To fight what it called lies from the Department of Homeland Security. They were directly refuting the federal government's entire justification for the operation. So this incredible unity in one city started to have these huge ripple effects across the country. It didn't just unite Minneapolis, it started to fracture the president's own political party, with some serious criticism coming from the inside. And behind the scenes, well, things were really starting to unravel. Administration officials were talking to reporters, off the record of course, and calling the statements from Homeland Security catastrophic. They were genuinely scared they were losing their own supporters and losing control of the story. And then you had these really prominent conservative legal experts who just started letting loose. Lawyer George Conway used this shark-biting sarcasm to basically say the administration was acting like it was above the Constitution. You can feel the deep frustration there, the sense that they were watching lawless behavior unfold. But it didn't stop there. The criticism started coming from people who had actually worked for the president. John Mitnick, who used to be the top lawyer for the Department of Homeland Security, came out with this just stunning statement, calling for the president to be impeached and removed over his old department's actions. And that's when you started to see elected officials from the president's own party breaking ranks. Vermont's Republican Governor Phil Scott did not mince words. He called what was happening, at worst, a deliberate federal intimidation that was leading to the murder of Americans. That's a huge crack in party unity. So, all of this pushback, did it actually matter? Oh yeah, you could see the tangible impact in the polling numbers and in the media coverage.
The official story was collapsing. Take a look at this poll. Even from Rasmussen, a source that typically leans Republican, you see a huge majority of Americans, almost 60%, disapproving of the president's handling of the very issue that was at the center of all this. And that political damage was real. The president's approval rating was now underwater in 15 of the states he had won in the last election. That suggests that his key coalition of voters was starting to swing back against him. And then, you know it's getting serious when the media outlets that have traditionally been allies start to sound the alarm. The Wall Street Journal's editorial board said it plainly. The administration's spin isn't believable, and they warned that the whole strategy was backfiring on the Republican Party. The New York Post's editorial board was even more direct. They basically told the president, look, people can see what's happening with their own eyes. They said that swing voters were horrified by the images of U.S. citizens dying at the hands of federal agents. But in the middle of all this political chaos, something else emerged. It was a video of Alex Pretti himself talking at the bedside of a veteran he was caring for. And in his own words, he's talking about the sacrifice that freedom requires, the very principle that was now at the heart of this huge national crisis that his own death had sparked. So this entire sequence of events, from one man's tragic death to the total collapse of an official government narrative, it really leaves us with a fundamental question. When a government's story is so completely rejected by its own people, who has the power to write what comes next?